Welcome back. In today's episode, I sit with Rachel Lebowitz. Rachel's a third-generation female entrepreneur growing up in Monsey, New York, and is second youngest in a family of 16 children. With a background in business behavioral science, she has a deep understanding and passion for bridging gaps in relationships, especially her one partner is a driven visionary or entrepreneur. Alongside her husband Ezra, they own Polycraft Industries, a printing flexo company which they grew threefold using the Entrepreneurial Operating System tools. Rachel is an EOS implementer, a co-host with Dr. Douglas Brackmann on the popular I Am Driven podcast, author of Empowered COO, and founder of Driven Spouse Forum. She also coaches people in recovery from codependence. To find out more about Rachel and her work, visit her link in the show notes. Before you skip through this ad, wait 30 seconds. I keep them short, and I only work with advertisers that I know are going to benefit you, my audience. This episode is brought to you by Seventh Day Shine, a fully kosher, Shabbos, and Jewish holiday makeup line. Born out of necessity, as many of my listeners may know the struggle of dealing with makeup over long holidays or Shabbos. Seventh Day Shine is completely kosher and permissible for application anytime, holiday or not. Rather than caking it on for 3 days or sleeping in it, or let's be honest, applying it and feeling a little guilty, they set out to fix all that. A makeup line that is ultra buildable, boasting all natural, super skin-friendly ingredients, and completely halachically verified, means that you don't have to make tough choices anymore. Beautiful powder-based makeup for holidays or your everyday, their brushes are phenomenal too. They've quickly become some of my favorite in my little artist box. I've been using the Pearls of Wisdom on my lids. It's like a beautiful, subtle, brightening pink. I just absolutely fell in love with this line. It is permissible for Jewish holidays, but it's really just a phenomenal makeup line for any time, any place. My listeners can use code LLG10 to save 10% on your next order and visit seventhDayShine.com to find out more. Welcome in, Rachel. Thank you so much for doing this straight off a plane from New York. Quite the journey. Right into studio. Thank you so much for being here today and doing this.
Adel, thank you so much for having me. You have a beautiful, humble abode.
Thank you.
It was so nice to see in person. Like when you say you're real, you're real. Like audience, everybody, she's real.
Oh my God. This is the ultimate compliment. And it looks similar to how it presents online?
Totally.
Okay.
It's like totally unedited.
Okay.
Your little room there with your bags and things hanging. It's like, gosh.
I guess, we all wonder if the people we watch online, if their lives resemble anything about their, offline lives resemble their online persona. And there's so much trickery. I've had hair people come here and tell me you wouldn't believe how many influencers, they have one corner that's beautiful, but the rest is chaos. And just you go do their hair and you're climbing over garbage. You're like, oh my God, but it's true.
Yeah, because for you, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not, you first have your life and then you go on Instagram. It didn't work the other way around.
Do you want to switch places? Because you're doing a good job. Thank you. So you do so many things. You're such a multi-hyphenate. I met you actually through a women's networking organization that I had a brief stint with. The organization didn't continue, but I do actually really feel like one of the reasons I had to get involved with that was to meet you, because our paths continued to cross. And I love the work you do. I love the type of work that you choose to do. And I've heard you speak before, and I'm like, this woman knows her stuff. So let's get into it so that people could learn. Tell me a little bit about your background and then how that led you to doing what you're doing today.
Sure. And thank you so much for that grandiose introduction. And I was thinking about that last night. I was like, how did we meet and when we met? And something I love about you is that you are not you're not afraid to put all your different, you've gone from doing design to, face stuff and all that. And you just put it all out there and you own every part of it. And I know I'm in a stage where people are still going to see many different versions of what I do, and owning all parts of it and saying this lead to that, which led to that, which led to that.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm now.
Yeah.
And that's a lot about my story. That's a lot what it is about. It's about growing up in a ultra Hasidic Monsey house, 16 kids.
16 children.
It was like an army base.
Good reference.
I am super proud of my family. All my sisters are super educated, went to college, not the typical, but
was education a big focus in your house?
Yeah.
Okay.
My parents loved education. My father was very educated.
Okay.
My mother is extremely creative.
Wow.
She's a driven. I think we're going to talk about that more.
Yeah.
I think we don't appreciate enough the women in our life, their drivenness, which led me to my grandparents. Both grandmothers owned businesses. So I'm like third generation female entrepreneur kind of thing.
Okay.
And I grew up and I worked for my dad. I literally punched a time card, got paid at like 10, 12 years old. And then the bus dropped me off at the store.
So you've like been working for almost your whole life.
Yeah, I grew up in a business world. Like if you knew numbers, you were, that was.
Are you also the driven party in your relationship? Because you seem pretty driven also, but you both work.
I think that what's unique about my husband and I is that we're both super driven, which comes with its own challenges, but which is also super fun.
Right. I could totally see that.
Yeah.
All right. So you come from basically like your grandmothers on both sides were like business women.
Yeah.
Impressive as hell. For like that time, that time women weren't working that much.
I think they were. I think it was out of necessity.
Yeah.
I think we forget that.
So why do we have this sort of like archetypal like Jewish housewife? Where did that come from? There are so many, like you have to imagine when these families came over post-war, the women were probably all working and doing some sort of like schmata or garment, right?
100%. And I heard the podcast with your mom. She was also working.
Yeah.
I don't know where in our culture that thing seeped in of like women being shamed for leaving the house. I think it came when we started prioritizing like this helicopter parenting lifestyle.
That's true. Say more on that. Say more.
I don't believe in helicopter parenting.
Yeah. Same. Oh, so much same.
You know how they say like weak kids create strong, like weak generations create stronger generations, create weak generations. I think we're up to where I'm a little bit like, I'm an older generation. I think there are many people my age.
Are you willing to share how old you are?
I'm only 31.
Oh my God, you're so young. Okay.
But
yeah,
I am the youngest. So
my
class had a lot of kids that were either the oldest or the youngest.
Right.
Like it's that cutoff. And those that were the oldest grew up with like, helicopter parent kind of, because we're going to do it better, right?
Yeah.
And then their kids are the ones that were super spoiled already, and then they're going to have to toughen up.
Right. Like we've overcorrected.
Yeah, totally. And that's the cycle of life.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so you're working driven woman. Your grandmothers were working driven women.
So I work for my dad, and I am super fascinated how employees act very differently when my parents are around versus not.
Oh.
And I love being number 15 of 16. I was like a silent observer. They called me Mickey Mouse ears because I heard and saw everything. Yeah. But I didn't translate. I didn't say what I heard. But then when I got a little...
perfect mob wife.
I got a little older, I told my parents I want to go to college. And although my older siblings went, like my parents weren't super happy about it, but I did convince them. And I did Empire State, which is like, in those days, you just read a book, you wrote up your essay, and you emailed it.
Okay.
So I did business behavioral science.
Okay.
And I always said I want to be a psychologist, but I don't want to deal with people's personal problems. I want to deal with business problems.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for other companies, and I watched how consultants really took businesses for a ride. And it was fascinating to me how somebody can own a $30 million business, and literally, I watched that business go down and went down to 10 million by the time I left, and then it closed down shortly after.
Whoa. From 30 million.
Yeah. From a consultant's like not being a informed consumer from the consultant, not questioning, not believing in yourself and saying like, I built up this business. I know what's best for my business. Maybe I need like business science help.
Got it.
So my goal was always to do something around business behavioral science.
Business behavioral science. Like what? Okay.
So then fast forward, my husband and I got married, moved to Brooklyn. He bought off this business called Polycraft. We print on flexible packaging. So potato chip bags, bread bags, pillow bags kind of thing. Facility. He was working nonstop. He's super creative, super driven. He took the business from like 30 employees to 100 employees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But I was that Jewish mom that was complaining to everybody that will listen.
Okay, so your husband's out there slaying dragons, taking the business to leaps and bounds, and you're not unreasonably pissed off.
Totally. And I'm going to the country and I'm like...
The upstate New York, like
upstate
the quintessential summer activity.
And I take my car and I load my stuff alone and I get there and I watch everybody with their husbands unloading and I'm like freaking resentful.
It's so not funny, but I think everybody listening is like, like you've all been there.
Yeah. And so then a friend comes to me and she's like, look, there's this thing called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I think you guys should do it.
Yeah.
Took some months of convincing. I really wanted to become a professional EOS implementer at that time because I felt like this is business behavioral science, but like you can't be a dentist on your own teeth.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I had
like you can't give yourself therapy.
Exactly.
Right.
Although like everybody's reading self-help books and they think they're healed.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So we hired an implementer. We grew our business, but even more than that, what I say is that we got our life back.
Yeah.
We really got to a point where we knew where we're going. The typical entrepreneur, and like I think a lot of women can relate to this. You're having a 9-to-5 job or you're home, and if you're in a relationship where your spouse does share with you what's going on, it can go something like this. 9 o'clock in the morning, they're super pumped. They have this vision of like what dragon they're going to slay today, right?
Okay.
And then you call in like 1 o'clock to check in on them and you hear this like tense voice. You're like, what's going on? And they're like, everything is going terrible. I'm giving up. I'm selling the business. And you start worrying. You have this insecurity. You're like, how are we going to live, right? And then by 5 o'clock, you call in and check again, and they're like, no, things are fine. I think I'm just going to sell it and I'll buy it back at a loss.
What? This is very specific.
This is like one of the conversations that we've had.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has a different version of it.
Yeah.
And if they don't have it, they feel it.
Yeah. I agree.
Right? And as a wife in that relationship, there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
But one day my husband walked in and he's like, look, you should become an EOS implementer. Like, this is everything you ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
And the biggest mistake I made was taking him very seriously.
You're like, okay.
And I went and I signed up and I became an EOS implementer.
Yeah.
I started working with leadership teams. So what I do is, EOS is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a way of managing human energy. It's getting everybody in your company on the same page. Like, what's the goal? Where are we going? You'd be surprised how many people don't have that conversation.
Oh, are you joking? I wouldn't be surprised. I've worked in many companies, and the reason, like people don't leave companies, they leave like managers, they leave people. Like, the energy where you work will literally make or break everything about your experience as an employee and everything about the success of that business typically.
Absolutely.
Like, toxic workplaces take down businesses. It's not a secret.
Right.
That's why I'm so fascinated by your work, because it's very cool.
Yeah. So you get them on the same page.
Yeah.
You create a system of accountability. So if we're going to make 30 million in 3 years, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
Who's accountable for what? Like, oh, so you're going to take care of sales. You're going to take care of operations. And we get commitment.
Yeah.
Then we get that healthy, open, honest, cohesive environment. And I often say that EOS gives you everything that you wouldn't do in therapy. Those people that are resistant to therapy?
Yes.
So this is business therapy. This is exactly what I love. And when I sit with my teams, and some of them are, male entrepreneurs, I always tell them, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for your wife.
Yeah.
Because if you're more present and you have what you want, you could be more present at home. That is if they choose to.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. And ultimately, it's all about us.
So what happened was, I've been and being that observer with the Mickey Mouse ears. So I'm sitting with these teams and I'm watching how all entrepreneurs have that same personality type of being super like all over the place, ADD, totally like futuristic, goal-oriented. COO gets super frustrated. They're like, but how are we going to do this? Like CEO says like, let's go to 30 million. COO says, how do we do this? And they're like, I don't know, we'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And there's that tension. And suddenly I'm thinking to myself, that's the exact tension that spouses have with entrepreneurs. And part of my journey was healing from codependency and helping other women along their journey of healing of codependence, usually spouses of addicts. So that's when I realized those similarities between driven entrepreneurs and addicts. And it like all clicked.
Like, in other words, if you're in a relationship with an addict, it will feel very similar in a lot of sensations, ways, behaviors as being in a relationship with like a highly driven spouse or a super successful or hard working spouse or entrepreneur.
Yeah, because entrepreneurship is a glorified addiction.
100%. Yeah. But it's a good addiction to have.
Addictions can't be cured.
Right.
They could only be arrested or they could be transferred.
Morphed.
So people that are super spiritual could get a spiritual addiction. You can be addicted to meditation. You could be addicted to work. You could be addicted to alcohol. I think somebody that has a driven personality, which we can talk about more about having, I think it's what they've seen now in studies that it's genetic.
Yeah.
Also.
Addiction is.
Addiction.
Yeah.
That's the recent studies. Then you can't change your DNA.
No.
So how are you going to live that life in balance where you're just taking your drivenness and making the best out of it?
Can you give a few signs how someone might know if they're a codependent? Because I feel like some codependents may not know that they're codependent.
Okay, so what I
say this as maybe a secret codependent.
In order to talk about codependent, I want to like set up what that relationship looks like.
Okay.
And this is called relationship math. Okay. So I guess we're diving right in.
That's my favorite line. Yeah, let's dive into relationship math.
Relationship math is this comes from Dr. Ross Rosenberg, who is a psychologist, and he bases it on the most extremes of relationships, which is one partner is highly narcissistic and the other partner is codependent.
Okay.
In a more day-to-day version, we call it one partner is self-focused and the other partner is other-focused.
And pause.
Yeah.
How many people right now are going, I'm obviously the other focused?
Right. So let's explain that, okay? And I want to explain that with basics. So even, let's say, a parent and a child, it is natural for that relationship for a child to be self-focused.
Yeah.
A child should be caring about like their needs.
Yep.
And a child from when it's born thinks that the whole world is surrounded around them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the natural state of being. A parent should be other focused. They should be focusing on their child. Now, dysfunction happens if a parent is self-focused, right? Those are those narcissistic parents that think that their children are serving them.
Yeah.
Right? That could be a teacher or student. But then when you get to a relationship, you will notice that in every relationship, there's one person that's very goal-oriented. And that is what self-focus is. It really is about, do you seek validation externally or internally? Internal validation is, I'm so successful, I'm going to reach that number, and that's my goal. External validation is, if that person likes me, then I'm successful.
Right.
So many COOs fall into this trap because it's the perfect relationship for that, where CEO sets the bar, a COO has to reach it, and if they don't, they feel like a failure.
Yeah.
But maybe that was unattainable. Maybe it was unrealistic, and now you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
So now take it to marriages. you have one spouse that's the driven entrepreneur, and that is called living in the narcissistic fantasy. Dr. Doug Brackmann, the author of Driven, who I partnered now with, and he wrote the foreword to my book, Empowered COO, and I'm the co-host on his podcast, talks about the narcissistic fantasy.
Okay.
That is that somebody that's self-focused and that is driven is focused on reaching a goal, and they believe that their life will be perfect when they reach that goal. What happens is anybody that stands in their goal becomes an enemy.
Yeah.
Right? So they're focusing on their goal and they're having this fantasy that when they reach it, everything will be perfect. But the problem is it's a moving goalpost. So it's 10 million, it's 20, it's 30.
Right.
And if you are a spouse in that relationship, it can get very burnt out and tiring, because it could be like, oh, we're going to have that house when we reach X, and we're going to go on vacation when we get to that. And then you are waiting around, and the just goalpost keeps moving. In the extreme forms of that relationship, the spouse that's other focused loses their sense of self, becomes enmeshed. I always, when I work with my clients about other focusedness, codependence, I ask them, if you're on an island all by yourself, you're not a mother, you're not a spouse, you're not a sibling, nobody, who are you?
Yeah.
And very few people can answer that question.
Like, who are you outside of all of your defined roles that society has put on you or you put on yourself?
Exactly.
Who are you outside of that?
Yeah.
I actually think that's a very deep question. I think Chassidus covers that somewhat, but like, I don't actually know the answer to that question.
So
does anybody?
There is no one answer.
Yeah.
But the idea is, if you can see yourself independent of all your roles, then you can tap into your true sense of self.
Mm.
And I think the issue is that many women get enmeshed in all their roles and lose themselves. And that's where they become resentful. That's where we act like victims. And we're like, but he's never home and I have to do everything. And that's a narrative that we keep playing in our head. And the problem is that the ultimate form of codependence is highly narcissistic. It's, I'm a victim and poor me. And now everything is surrounding that.
Right. Oh my God. But is that not just another form of like corrupt narcissism, like narcissism gone wrong? It's still kind of about you. Like I don't know. They're both opposite extremes in different ways.
Psychologically, narcissism is a form of codependence.
Right.
Like there's many different versions of codependence.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is that many women fall into, you can either be overt codependent or covert, which means you either become extremely controlling. Mm-hmm. Think about the spouse of an alcoholic. They hide the alcohol. They lock up the jewelry and the money because I'm going to control him. I'm going to make the environment safe for him. Yeah. When you believe that your power is to control the people, and you make other people your higher power. Mm-hmm. So the opposite side is when you become a victim and you let other people puppeteer your emotions, and your self-worth depends on how others perceive you, then that is, the victim side of codependence.
Right. Wow. Whoa. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I think it's very heavy.
It's you know what? Listen, I love heavy. Are you comfortable, and you could totally say no, are you comfortable talking about any of the ways that codependency presented for you? Like, how did you know you were codependent? Like, let me give you an example for myself. I'll throw myself under the bus first, okay? Like, I don't know if this is codependent or just cute. Sometimes I have that question, like, am I codependent or cute? Like, when like my partner's in town or I'm in New York, we want to do every single solitary thing together. I'm like, is that codependent or cute? I don't know. Like, how do you know how codependency is showing up for you?
Well, do you want to do all these things, or you're thoroughly not going to enjoy them? But
no, I want to do it.
Then that's just having a great relationship.
The problem is when you
change your plans, or don't take care of your needs because you put other needs before you.
Right.
So having very low self-care, not being able to say no, not having boundaries. I've struggled with codependence in many different forms. Growing up in a big household, it's very easy to be codependent.
Yeah.
You're picking up, I'm an empath. I pick up everybody's emotions.
Yeah.
I always felt like I have to take care of everybody around me, right? And as a mother, if I sit down to dinner, my kid asks me for a cup of water and I get up for them, and then I don't get to eat because then the doorbell rang and I become resentful, I just presented a model for my child how I don't matter.
Right.
And then they learn to treat their spouse like that.
Yeah.
Right? So we're transferring that codependence by really just not taking care of our needs first. If I make a plan, I want to go to the mall with friends, and then somebody calls me and says, "Can you drive XYZ to the airport?" And really, they're not in your inner circle of people that you really owe.
Right.
And you do
I don't
that.
even take people in my inner circle to the airport. That's how much I self-care.
But imagine all these people that do it for the sake of being nice.
Yeah.
So that's where the difference between being nice versus kind is. And I think we're stuck in being a lot of nice.
Yeah.
Nice is feel good. It's what feels good right now. It's not wanting to look abrasive or pushing back.
Yep.
It's being passive aggressive or passive. Being kind is doing what's right for the situation. And sometimes it's having a hard conversation. Sometimes it's pushing back. Sometimes it's questioning your spouse and saying, "Hey, I know that you love to work. You love growing your business, but I'm struggling here. So let's figure out what each of us need in this relationship in order for you to be your best self and for me to be my best self."
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how many women have that conversation.
Can't imagine it's very high. I think maybe now things are getting better. Like, I do feel like my parents' generation, therapy was a thing, but not like, I think our parents' generation had much more the mentality like, it is how it is. It is what it is, you know? Whereas like now, I think our generation's much more like, we could do better. We need to do better. You know, we want to have healthier environments. You obviously did. I did.
We want better, but we often forget that that better lays in communication.
So,
like, instead of sitting in that circle, and maybe this will air right before summertime and people will be able to like...
I think it's going to air before that, but maybe.
And instead of like talking to everybody about your resentment, why not have that conversation? And you know what resentment is? Resentment is fermented jealousy.
Pickled jealousy.
Yeah.
Oh my God, resentment is pickled jealousy.
Well, why could the guys go out every Thursday night and chill and I can't?
That's why I made Cocoa Club. Okay, so there was like this thing, you know, like guys do this like right before Shabbos, Shabbat. They a lot of times they get together and like they'll have like a drink and a little. I'm like, how come there's nothing like that for women? Because the women are, you know, holding down the fort. I'm like, women should also have a cool get together before the weekend because they also worked hard all week.
Yeah, and they could. Like, if you plan your week right and you do everything on Thursday, then by Friday you should be able to go out and have some fun, right?
I guess it depends how many children you have. Like at 16, maybe a little harder.
No, I don't think so. I think it's all about choices.
Yeah.
So when you feel resentful because you look at your spouse and you say, they have something that I don't have, the first question to ask yourself is like, what is it that I actually want?
Ooh.
Because like, do I want to go where they're going, or do I just need a bath?
Yeah.
Do I need a massage?
Yeah.
Do I need downtime?
Yeah, a walk.
A walk.
Whatever, listen to a podcast, preferably mine, you know,
Right.
whatever it looks like for you.
And
It's true. I grew up in a house, this feels extremely pertinent to me because I grew up in a household where like my mom was always upset with my father for some reason or another. And there was never resolution around it. And I'm like, and I'm hearing what you're describing. And so like my experience of a woman is like my mom was resentful at my dad that he got to go out, you know, like before Shabbos and do the thing or whatever, or the drink, right? Like all the things.
I think that's a theme in our community.
Yeah.
And that resentment is really a deflection of people's personal feelings.
Right.
I've sat in many like parenting courses, and one of the questions that the instructor asks the women is like, what are you feeling? And many women say, I feel that you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, you are is not a feeling.
No.
Like, what are you feeling? Being able to identify your feelings is the first step to owning yourself and recovering from that resentment and codependence, whatever you want to call it.
What did you know that you wanted for your life? Like, what were some like core values you wanted for your family life or your marriage that like you were uncompromising about? Like, this is how I want to live my life. Like you said, if I prepare Thursday, I could do this Friday. Like, what were you uncompromising about that you wanted to build in your own life and marriage?
So I got married and I saw my husband living his best life. And
That's a good way of putting it.
And I was sitting in a chair and waiting for somebody to come and give me permission that I could live my best life.
Yeah.
Right? And then resentment happened. And then I woke up and I was like, what do I want? And I don't want to be a housewife. That I know. I grew up in a very business-minded family. All my sisters do some kind of work or another, and they manage beautifully, having big houses, families, and doing something creative.
Yeah.
Knowing what I want, I was able to sit down and have that conversation. And we established a value in our family. And I know it's going to sound obnoxious, but we went on vacation. I took a deck of value cards. I love the Schwartz system.
Okay.
A professor in Israel wrote this deck of cards on family values, on values.
Okay, we'll link it in the show notes.
Yes. And you play this game where you eliminate all the cards until you come down to shared values. Really, I had to be honest with myself that health is not a big value for me.
Okay.
I will rather work than go to the gym. I had to be
respect that, girl.
I had to be honest that tradition is not a big value for me. Like,
Whoa.
I will not make a gefilte fish or 3 types of kugels.
Right.
I'll rather take another coaching call on Friday. You know?
I understand you the most, but we need every type.
No,
But,
it's about being honest with yourself.
being honest with yourself.
I think that's the hardest part, being able to own all of your parts. Like, I just finished designing my house, and I did it myself.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I think I had such anxiety about people coming and seeing my house. And I sat with it, and I said, why?
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't think that about you.
Yeah, you know why?
Why?
Because most of my friends that could afford building beautiful houses
They have designers.
have a designer. And if somebody comes in and says, oh, you chose that floor, they could say, well, my designer chose it. I know, she's so stupid.
Oh my God, Rachel, this is so vulnerable. Okay. Wow.
I had somebody come in and one tile that I put in was marble and it got ruined and it had to be restored. And the guy's sitting there on the floor and he's like, who designed this house? And I'm like, why? Is there a problem?
My designer.
And
Make up a fake designer.
And I'm like, I did. And he's like, oh, it's beautiful. But this house just, he's like, you should have whatever you want. Like, he was trying to like walk back and it was okay.
Yeah.
But being able to own, I think a lot of that accountability is very hard for most women, to be able to go to work and coming back, bringing full circle this conversation.
Yep.
For a woman to be able to say, I don't like being home. I want to have a job. I want to have a profession. I want to have something creative that I do outside of my home. It's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
Going to shul with that, going to a wedding and like I tell people, I choose going to a concert over a wedding. So I won't go to second cousins' weddings.
Yeah.
You're not going to find me there.
Yeah. The wedding circuit's interesting. Like, I'm like, find myself never at weddings. I see so many people on my Instagram at weddings all the time, but it really is a thing. If you have a large family, you are at a wedding every Tuesday and Thursday. And that could be a lot.
Yes, you have to set boundaries around it.
Yeah.
Like, I figured out if I go out more than twice a week, I'm shot.
Me
And then
too.
my kids are the ones that bear the brunt, right? So being able to set boundaries, being honest with yourself, owning and being accountable for your actions. So when that floor got ruined, I didn't blame anybody. I couldn't blame anybody. I had to own it. And it's hard to own your consequences.
Don't I know it?
But yet we expect that from our kids. And a lot of parents deflect. It's very easy to shift blame on our husbands and say, oh, you work so hard. But did you ever state your need? did you ever say like, I really want you home Fridays? Can you take over Fridays?
Yeah.
Right? So we deflect, and we do that. Like a lot of that is on kids, and that's what creates toxic shame. That's where we let people in our life know, oh, you're no good. You know, we talk about loving our kids unconditionally, but when your kid spills milk or water or the cereal and you yell at them, you just gave them that message that they're no good.
100% guilty of being that. I don't want to say yell. I'm going to out myself like that. But you know what? To be honest, I think I have. And I don't know. You're so right. Like all your reasonability of like being a great parent goes out the window when your kid like spills something everywhere. What is that?
Where's that unconditional love?
Yeah. Mine's gone. Tis nowhere. Tis nowhere.
And the answer is to be able to own it.
Yeah.
It's all about owning it and being able to come back and say, you know, I love a clean house, and it's really frustrating to me when milk spills, but like, hey, we're going to clean it up.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm guilty of that too. But so that comes back to that drivenness. And that drivenness, Dr. Doug talks about, is a gene mutation, actually. And 10% of the world has this gene mutation, the D2D4 gene, that is responsible for registering the dopamine in your body. And what happens is when this gene is mutated, your brain doesn't get the message that it has enough dopamine.
Thrill seekers.
Yes.
Ultimate thrill seekers.
Yes.
They basically overdose on dopamine because their body never tells them they had enough.
And where does that come from? It comes from living in fight or flight mode. It's either acute trauma, so one big trauma, or prolonged trauma.
Yeah.
So our like I think the Jewish community has a higher, like if you take the 10% of the world and you say, how is it distributed? I think a big part of it is in the Jewish community.
Well, wouldn't you know? What a surprise.
It's because of our history.
Yes. Oh my God, persecution, right.
Right?
But right. I mean, a lot of cultures have been persecuted, but I guess we've really been since the beginning of time.
We're destined for that.
That's true.
When people in the non-Jewish community were like, oh, I'm so sorry for you about October 7th. And I really appreciated their sincerity.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's been 70 years that nobody's killed us.
It's true. But they continue to try. But that dang D242 gene is just going to be like, no, not today. Okay, so that's interesting. So we hold a lot of the Jewish population presents with this gene mutation.
Yeah, and it's really the shame-based gene.
And okay. This has nothing to do with entrepreneurial? Or
It totally is entrepreneurial. Because think about an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Why did they become an entrepreneur? And when I sit with my clients and we work through their core focus, it's called their mission statement. What's this bigger picture here? I've learned to just cut to the chase. And I look at that.
Who hurt you?
You took it out of my mouth. Like, who hurt you when you were 7 years old?
Yes.
It's either they got thrown out of school or they grew up poor. Or
they had something to prove to somebody about their worth.
Look at Elon Musk. Like, I read that book and
I know.
I'm like, he was
bullied.
bullied.
To the audio.
Right?
Yeah.
So
And by his own father.
And in school. And nobody stuck up for him.
And now that I'm experiencing this bullying thing, I can totally understand how it could absolutely shape someone's entire decision about their future.
Yeah, so what happens in that moment that you get bullied, you feel shame. And you tell yourself, I'm never going to let this happen again.
Yeah.
And you build these walls and these mechanisms and you create resilience. That D2D4 gene is the resilience. It's being driven is resilience.
Got it.
So we have an overload of that in our community. We have inherited abandonment issues.
That's true.
We were abandoned 2,000 years ago, and we're just still working our way back.
Okay, got it. Someone left us, like, you know when your mother doesn't pick you up at the bus stop one time, and you're like, no one loves me. We got left at the proverbial bus stop one time, thousands of years ago.
And we have that drivenness in us. So now, I think we recognize it more in males.
Yeah.
And that's why there is such a
Although, I don't know, like you said in the beginning, I think that is changing a lot too, because I don't know, like even like in my perception, like the Jewish female is like really out in full force, like so many working women. And even like if you think about like Chabad houses and stuff like that, like their enterprises. These women are running enterprises.
I want to take it to the next level. Okay, we think that drivenness has to be work related, money related.
Ooh,
it doesn't. Like my mom sewed up clothing like for all of us. She stayed up till late at night.
Wow.
I got married and I was
like she created your clothing.
Yeah, she went. She
was a seamstress.
Yeah, she
That's
loved
incredible.
sewing. And then she put us on the bus the next morning.
We were so well dressed.
We were.
I love that.
Yeah, she would get those patches and iron them on.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then you remember those big
I love how you
safety pins?
Yes.
In the skirt.
But I love how you just flipped me over on that, because like I was totally going toward like driven work. But you're right. It's that driven gene does not have to equate to what traditional work, right? Looks different for everyone. Because I do also understand, because on this podcast in particular, I have so many driven women and entrepreneurs that sometimes I feel like it could even come off like, I don't want to say condescending, but like the women in the house are doing a shit ton of work, and it's endless and thankless and never ending. And then I'm like, but we're like, that's not like traditional work. It's freaking work. Yeah. It's the hardest. Like, I couldn't do it. That's why I run away. That's why I go do my other work. Because that work terrifies me.
And it is drivenness. Like, I remember being newly married, and I was like, if I'm gonna cook soup, I'm gonna make 3 different types of soup at once.
That's normal. Like, that's normal.
That's super normal, right? And now, like, preparing for holidays, right?
Yeah.
We put that whole display. I think we don't recognize our own drivenness, and that is what creates chaos. It's a need for chaos.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman that feels like you constantly got to perform, if you can recognize that you're driven and hone that in, because my coach always says, big lights cast big shadows. Mm-hmm. So in the entrepreneurial world, all these visionary CEOs, everybody says, oh, he's such a narcissist, he's a crazy head, and they're allowed to be crazy. But we all know the black smoke that they create. Yeah. And that's where the COO is there to catch it. Mm. In relationships, if one of us are super driven, and I could be finding myself cleaning grout and unscrewing my oven door at any given time.
Okay.
And then
I love that for you.
And then suddenly bedtime comes.
Right.
You can't make bedtime.
Yeah.
It's ADD. It really is.
Yeah.
It's undiagnosed ADD.
I have been there. At bedtime, I'm doing 4,000 things that absolutely don't need to be done. It's totally ADD. I reckon. So interesting that we both have that in common.
But how do you wrap back from that?
How do you?
Without blaming everybody.
How do you? That's actually, please, because I don't know the answer to that question. No, it's hard. Like, I really can appreciate what you're saying. And I think it's like, it's so easy. I really see both sides. It's easy for the entrepreneur. It's like, look what I'm building here. Look what I'm creating for you. I'm slaying dragons. And sure, it's fun many times, but many times it's not fun and it's hard work. And like, I get each party's resentment, because there is somebody always holding down the fort with a much less sexy life, without the work dinners, without everyone praising you, without being in charge. Like, it's that's a sexy life to be an entrepreneur in many regards. And I know entrepreneurs will tell you how horrible it is, but like, it's tough. Like, this is why your work is so freaking important, because that disparity exists a lot.
Yeah, and think about that entrepreneur coming home.
Yeah.
And being met with like resentment and take out the garbage, and suddenly they're being told what to do.
They're being abused.
Like at work, they're telling everybody what to do.
Yeah.
Here they're coming home and they're being told what to do. And the truth is that entrepreneurs' greatest strength at work is their biggest obstacle at home.
Yeah.
Because what they are great at is fixing, solving, and saving. And no woman wants to be fixed, solved, or saved.
Not this woman.
Not this woman either.
Interesting. That is very true. Yeah. Okay.
So how do we bridge that gap, right? And I call it 3 gaps. The expectation gap.
Oh, 3 gaps.
In driven entrepreneurial relationships.
I think 3 gaps in these, like the disparity in these relationships where there's like a high achiever and like somebody who's holding down the fort.
Yes.
What are the 3 gaps?
So the first one is the expectation gap. Spouses expect their driven entrepreneur in their life to tone down or slow down or be more present, be more hands-on. And they get very disappointed when that doesn't happen. On the other hand, the entrepreneur might expect the spouse to perform a certain way.
Right.
Show up at events, show up, host, prepare, hold down the fort. I've been to many events where entrepreneurs bring their spouses, and I can see that resentment and that stone face. Like, it's like dripping.
Totally.
And when you have that conversation of shared goals, so, hey, entrepreneur, what do you see what do you see in your life? And they're like, I'm never stopping to work. I'm not retiring. I want to build this business to 250 million. I want to sell it.
Is he single? Absolutely, just joking.
Do you want to be the one supporting that?
Right. You know, it's actually super funny that you say that, because I've joked like with my partner. I'm like, oh, like life is so expensive. He's like, that working harder means I'm not around as much. And I was like, is that a bad thing? No, but to your point, I think a lot of people don't realize.
They want the lifestyle.
You want the lifestyle, but it comes at a great cost.
Jeff Bezos' wife got a nice, they divided their money really well. And somebody once, an entrepreneur told me, he said, Jeff Bezos' wife got that because she made him dinner. She rubbed his back. She was there with a smile. Like, that is the cost.
You think?
I hope so.
You think Mackenzie?
But then they divorced. I don't know.
Yeah, they got divorced. I don't know how much back scratching and foot rubbing she was doing.
But maybe they divorced because they grew apart.
Yeah.
Which is
because
really
of the 3 gaps.
Exactly.
Okay, expectation.
The second one is the interest gap.
Interest.
So spouse interest is home, maybe doing something fun once a night, maybe talking about their favorite book, their favorite recipe, their favorite movie, their friends. Entrepreneur's interest is the business. And they say, like, if you love what you do, you're not working for a day.
Yep.
And that's like super true.
Yep.
And they don't know how to shut down that part of their brain. Like, even when they're home, they're not present. Right. And
so expectation
and interest. And that goes back to, if you create an environment in your house where the minute your spouse walks through the door, an entrepreneur, you're, overbearing.
Right. Oh.
And you're being like, take out the garbage, put the kids to sleep and all that, they don't want to come home.
No.
It's not fun. And and did we forget, like, they love dopamine. So they ain't getting no dopamine at home.
I'm stressed for this dynamic.
But the solution is to have that conversation of, what do I need in order to not come through overbearing when you walk into the house?
Yep.
And what do you need to be your best? Because an entrepreneur's greatest asset is whoever is supporting them.
Yeah.
It's
true.
It's been proven over and over again.
Of course. It would make sense that the success of an entrepreneur was like, when you looked at probably a wide range of entrepreneurs, I'm sure there was a study done. They probably had, the super successful ones had a supportive mate, I'm sure. Someone at home making sure like a lot of their needs were met. Emotional, right?
I don't think we're accountable or responsible for other people's emotional needs. I think we're responsible to create space and not shut down other people's emotions.
Okay, good distinction. I'm feeling humbled in this conversation. No, I think, listen, I don't know. I think relationships are different. Like, I think some guys probably like need or appreciate like their partner's perspective. I don't want to say wife. Partners like appreciate their partner's perspective. And so it's not like you're responsible for their emotional state, but more so like, I don't know, if you're feeling supported, usually there's like good communication and like, I don't know, a lot of exchange about.
So here's the challenge. Entrepreneurs are very direct usually, and they're very opinionated.
Yeah.
If you're married to an entrepreneur and you're like, I don't think I like green peppers. The entrepreneur could be like, what do you mean you don't like green peppers? Green peppers are the best thing that ever created on earth. And they go on and on and on and on.
Right.
And then you're like, never mind, I'm not going to voice my opinion.
Right.
So learning to understand how an entrepreneur thinks, and that when they state their opinion, it's okay. Like, you let it play itself out is super important.
Yeah.
It's, again, that is what makes them great at work.
Right.
It's also what makes it a challenge at home.
Right.
My coach, Kelly Clemens, talks about this in her book, How to Build Your Business Without Growing Apart. I think that's the name of the book, but I'll give it to you for the show notes.
Yeah.
And we collaborated in creating this forum for spouses. And you would be surprised, most driven entrepreneurs are actually married to pretty driven women.
I would think so. Because I think, okay, what was the third gap? Because I think that what you just said ties very much into the third gap.
So I want to cover something about the interest gap. A solution, because I'm very into practical solutions. Like, if we're talking, giving us some solutions.
Yeah.
So there's two things. It's having that conversation of what you need. I curated my life in a way where I have somebody coming into my house every Wednesday night, babysitter. And so like that, I know if I want to be spontaneous, I can. Sometimes she's home, I'm home, she cleans, does nothing. Sometimes I go to my office. Sometimes I go out with my sisters. But now my husband knows that he can call me on Wednesdays. It's like, hey, let's go out for a date night.
Exactly, because you freed it up.
Exactly.
Ooh, you created a little possibility.
He doesn't feel needed.
Yeah.
He feels like wanted.
Got it. This space is free, should you choose to do something.
Yes.
But also you have seems like you have a lot of other stuff going on if you want to.
Yeah, but you have to, because if you're sitting and waiting for them to call, and most self-focused entrepreneurs are avoidant attachment versus other focused people are anxious attached.
Right.
So we can become very enmeshed and needy. And people ask me, why do you work? Like, if you have this great business, it's because I don't want to be sitting home and waiting for, how was your day?
But what do people do when they're very differently attached? That's a hard gap, bridge to gap.
So if you know that your spouse is an avoidant attached, you have to create that space for them. They don't want to take care of anybody.
Right.
They want to feel wanted, not needed.
Yep.
It's too scary to attach when you feel like you're needed and that you have to take care. But if you're an adult in the relationship and you take care of yourself and you have all your needs met and you ask for your needs, you just have to state it. How many guys are like, I wish I would have known what my wife wanted. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because they're so self-focused. They're driven on that goal. So they forget to be like, hey, oh, wait, what does the other person want? Right?
Yeah.
And another thing is talking about needs. When my husband calls me at 7:00 and it's bedtime, I recently said this. I said, you're going to get the worst version of me. Like, I'm yelling then. Bedtime is not
Bedtime's
pretty.
not fun.
Yeah.
No one likes it. It's the worst time.
If anybody that tells me that it goes down smoothly in their house is lying.
They're lying.
Totally.
Or I question what's wrong with their children. Because children innately do not want to go to bed. I don't know. Like, my two kids are so different personalities, like night and day. Neither of them like to go to bed. So I know when people say their kids like to go to bed, I'm like, no, you're lying to me.
Well, I have 3 driven kids.
And they're all boys.
And they're all boys. So they will only go to bed once they've used up all their energy.
Of course.
Which could take very long.
But that's almost all kids, don't you think?
Totally.
Yeah.
So having that conversation like, hey, if you call me at 2:00, you're going to get the best version of me. If you call me at 7, so what's the image in your brain you want to have about your wife? So decide when you want to call them. Right. True.
What's the third gap?
It's the knowledge gap.
Knowledge. So we have expectation, interest,
and
knowledge. That's where the greatest disparity happens between a driven and a non-driven, or a self or other focused spouse.
Or an entrepreneur and their spouse, even if their spouse is driven.
True.
So driven spouses that are in relationship with entrepreneurs maybe are multitaskers. Like in my group, some are pediatricians, nutritionists, they do something.
Yeah.
They're just not looking to, they know that they're not in the driver's seat of the drivenness within the relationship.
Yeah.
Meaning if your kid is sick, who's taking day off? Your driven entrepreneur husband or you? Right? It's literally a monetary decision.
Yep.
Sometimes.
Yeah. It'd be like that.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're not, but the entrepreneurial world really changed. 30 years ago, it was very blue collar. It was you worked hard, you were successful, you went home. Today, entrepreneurship is a lot about emotional intelligence and knowledge.
Yep.
So what happened to me personally was I was out of the workforce for a short time before I became an EOS implementer. We started running an EOS then. And my husband would come home and he would be like, I'm never changing a light bulb. And I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I took this assessment and it says I'm a high quick start. And that means that I can't do anything repetitive. So I'm just not doing it.
Must be nice.
And I'm like, you're barely home and now you're not even going to do.
Yeah. Change a light bulb.
Right? But really, once I melted and I went and I took the assessment myself, I realized that I'm a high quick start too.
Yeah, me too.
And nothing is getting done in our house.
Everything's quick starting and nothing's quick finishing.
Nothing is follow through. There's no follow through.
That's so funny. That would be tricky with two partners.
So we had to figure out something that Dan Sullivan calls who, not how. For every issue, you don't think about how you're going to solve it. You think about who's the right who.
Right. Who.
And coming back to our values, we decided if money could solve it, it's not an issue.
Right.
Because if we know that, and that was that moment that I said, what do I want? And I said, I want to create an identity for myself and I want to do something that's fun and that's my personal mission. And I define my mission as bridging gaps in entrepreneurial relationships. Then I must create the right who's in my life in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise I become resentful.
Yep.
Right? So the knowledge gap is about bringing that knowledge. Imagine women. So what happens is this husband takes this assessment. It's called Colby. They find out there are 10 quick start. Then they come home. The wife has no idea what the assessment is. And the husband starts communicating differently because he now has more knowledge. The wife doesn't have the knowledge. And then there is that gap that happens. She gets frustrated. She blames. He says, why don't you get me? And that's where they grow apart. And I'm suspecting maybe that's where Mackenzie and Jeff Bezos grew apart, right?
We would never speculate about Jeff and Mackenzie, but if one were to.
Right.
You know?
Because today entrepreneurship is about joining all these forums and going to all these networking events, and you're gaining knowledge and emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And if you have entrepreneurs take EQ assessments, most self-focused entrepreneurs have very low EQ. But the minute they have awareness of their self-focusedness, they very quickly gain EQ.
Yeah.
And now if you're the one that's not in the entrepreneurial world, then you're missing out. But Adel, I feel like you help with that gap by having this podcast because you're bringing so much knowledge to people that are not in the entrepreneurial world.
That is exactly what I'm trying to do. I just feel like either there's a few things that I think are important. I think female entrepreneurs end up getting pushed into this like arena, like they lose their femininity. Like we've kind of stripped the female entrepreneur and taken, I think the modern society has. And I just feel like bridging the gap in knowledge for even working women who just don't have time to get involved with like some of the other stuff. And then women who are not going to the office every day, like the knowledge gap is important. I think that's like a glue in relationships. You know, people kind of have to have stuff to talk about on date night. Like it can't just be the few things floating around your house, like including the humans. Like there has to be something expansive or else date night is repetitive and not that fun.
Right. What are the interests that overlap?
Yeah.
Where do you both find common interest? But you hit a button with driven women. And I know Yael touched on that briefly.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Doug Brackmann actually hired me to do research on the difference between driven women and driven men.
Okay.
Ego, at its core, is very masculine.
Yep.
Femininity is intuition. It's submissiveness. But when you tell a driven woman to submit, no, right? Why? And I believe that women have worked so hard to get past that glass ceiling that they become very defensive. Nobody gets me. I've made it. I know what I'm doing. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. And when they're in a relationship and they develop a lot of ego, then they might emasculate whoever is in that relationship with them. But they also take on a very masculine energy, and then they're not relating to the other women in their life.
That's sometimes that happens, I think, with driven female entrepreneurs. Like there's sometimes a femininity lost or like a softness. It also just makes sense. You're having to make the same reason the men go to work and have to make a lot of decisions, and they have, they're the leader, does toughen you a little bit. So I understand, but like, yeah.
In the beginning, I had a very hard time with sales.
Yeah.
Because I was taking all these sales courses and I was trying to do all these things and do the close. Like, so are you going to call me or am I going to call you? Right?
Yeah. I've been to sales training, so like I totally can appreciate what you like learned.
And it doesn't work.
People just want to.
It doesn't work for women. It works for guys.
I don't know if it works for. It could work more for guys. I generally think sales work if like people like you. If they like you, they want to work with you.
So that's the difference. Is what I've got to understand through my coach Kelly, is she says that women are lighthouses, men are tugboats.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because I'm just going to keep talking and sharing about what I do. I'm the lighthouse. And whoever this message resonates with will come and find me. Versus guys are just like, I'm going to, they make you sign on that dotted line and you find out afterwards what they sold you.
By the way, that's exactly why I felt kind of miffed. The audience wasn't privy to the conversation but like when I said this morning, when I got the message that someone was like, I love your podcast, can't wait to see where it goes. I'm like, I feel as though the people who need to hear what I have to say, same like you just said, they're finding me as they need to. I'm not like, I don't desperately need them to find me. So I guess I didn't understand that reference. Like, can't wait to see where this goes. I'm like, it just is what it is.
Right.
It's like what you just said.
So a driven woman that isn't in touch with her femininity will look very angry. Mm. And I find that most driven women are stuck in the anger. And I think that is because they have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. They think they have to. Mm. And they don't believe.
What if they are doing the heavy lifting? How do you get out of resentment then?
That was going to be my next sentence. They don't believe in work smarter, not harder. Delegate. Working your unique ability, like only do the things that you're really good at.
Yeah.
If you're trying to like do the dishes plus lead this big business, like you're failing.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
What are you really good at? What do you love to do? Conserve all your energy and put there. And do it and you know what? Moms could do this at home too. When I had that point where I had to embrace my ADD. And I looked at my kids and I said, I'm going to make meatballs. It will most probably taste different every time.
As a kid, that would make me anxious attached because I need my meatballs to taste the same every time.
So that's why I go to work and I explore over the years so your meatballs taste the same every time.
Yeah.
But my house will have spurts of interesting experiences versus same.
Yeah.
And I tell, my oldest is super driven, and I tell him, I'm going to teach you how to be a great salesperson. And every time you ask me for something, that's us practicing.
Okay.
And he's negotiating all the time.
Oh my God.
But I tell him
teaching a stone cold killer.
Right. But I tell him a great sale is where both sides are happy.
Yeah.
So if you ask me to stay up longer, plus you're not doing anything for me to feel like I gained from it, then I will be resentful.
Yeah.
And I won't want to deal with you again.
Yeah.
And that, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just so, everything to me is a business decision.
I, in many ways, understand that. Like, I think this is such a beautiful time for women. I think more so than any time in history, this is a really amazing time to be a woman. I think we're climbing the highest ranks. I think the ceilings have been shattered. I think women are in the highest levels of government, every industry, entrepreneur, so it's just interesting I feel lucky.
Yeah, I think we get the best of both ends.
Yeah.
The equality movement had to happen.
Yep.
But I was at some women's conference a few years ago, and the speaker said something very good. She said, today's days, we don't want equality, we want equity.
Yep.
Equality is 50-50.
Yep.
So if I'm responsible for 50, then no guy's opening the door for you.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But if I want a piece of the pie, and I acknowledge the fact that as a woman, also we have soft skills.
Yep.
We're valued for our soft skills.
Yep.
And if we think about the monetary value of a spouse that holds down the fort, I had a friend of mine, she said they were planning their will and their estate and everything. She said it would cost her husband like $1.2 million more if she's not alive.
Yeah. No kidding.
Know your word.
And the rest. Where can people learn more about you?
They can go to my website, I'm hyphenated. You said you're hyphenated in many ways when we started the podcast.
You literally are. And it'll be in the show notes too, but just it's nice to say.
Rachel-Lebowitz.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this today. Thank you for flying all this way and for just, sharing even about your own life. It's not always easy, but I love this work. And I appreciate it, on a personal level, and I'm so glad that you could be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My hope is that people listen to this conversation and they take a moment to reflect and introspect and flip the script in their life. Instead of being in the victim seat and being I'm doing all this, I'm not being recognized. Thinking about what the benefits are and what their needs are. It's basically just coming down to recognizing who you are as a person.
Yeah, I love that.
So thank you for having me.